Now we can get into what we've been waiting for and what maybe everyone's been waiting for.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry if you were excited about first baseman, sorry, but Steve Bloss was just too interesting to us.
To
So
pass up. Yeah.
we had to stall for a little bit, get that runtime up. But yeah, so yeah, it's our second year of doing positional ranks. So yeah, we'll probably reference throughout the episode where we had these folks last year because you know, I most of them I know 9 of my 10 were on my list last year. I think 9 of your 10 were on your list last year. But yeah, if you but yeah, just to preface, this is a list for how we think they will do in 2025. So a lot of it is projection and taking past performance and trying to estimate what it will mean for the upcoming season. It's not necessarily based on what they have done and more about what they could potentially will and can do. But yeah, so anything more before we want to get into this list?
No, let's talk about some first baseman here.
All right, yeah. Who do you have at number 10?
Yeah, for me, number 10 was the most difficult position to fill. Obviously, because it means you have to leave people off, right? And I was between three people for my number 10 spot. Two of them we previously mentioned in this episode were Josh Naylor and Nathaniel Lowe. Uh, but I didn't go with either of them. So shout out to both of them, both honorable mentions, both guys that I easily could have put in the top 10. But my heart is still with Vinny Pasquantino. I still believe. I just can't deny the combination of potential power plus contact abilities. Right, Vinny Pasquantino last year he was having a pretty good year before the injury bug hit him for the rest of the season in what, like July or August or whatever it was. He still put up a 262, 315, 446 slug for the identical OPS that he had in 2023 at 761. I still think there is a lot of potential in this bat. I playing in Kansas City obviously doesn't help him, but he's been braving the elements regardless. He hit 19 home runs last year with 554 plate appearances and was very durable bat for the time that he was in there. Like I said, the power potential. He's obviously a guy that hits the ball very well. He pulls it a lot as well. I believe he has around like a 30+% rate of fly balls being pulled, or at least that's what he had last year. I obviously really like that and will make it known how much I like that every time a player has that kind of thing. And like obviously he's going to be playing in Kansas City this year, so I can't just pretend like that caveat doesn't exist. But I think regardless, he's a guy that shoots the ball into the gaps very well, along with the power potential. Um, the walks could be up a little bit. They went down 2.4% from last year. But the strikeout rate and the whiff rate are both top 4 percentile in Major League Baseball, along with a very good hard hit rate, along with very good expected numbers, along with a 91 mile per hour average exit velocity. And also plus defense. He had 3 outs above average last year as well at first base. So I can't ignore what I think I could see from Vinny Pasquantino this year, and for that reason, he snuck onto my list at number 10. He was at number 9 last year, so he wasn't. He is dropping a bit from where I previously had him, but I had to keep him on the list.
Right, right. Yeah, it's very understandable considering a lot of the just underlying potential that he has and he displayed in that brief rookie season that he had. I mean, it was like the numbers he was putting up that year and the combination of contact and power that he was able to display was at such a young age was pretty crazy. So it's hard not to hold on to that. My number 10 is someone we previously talked about this episode. It is Nathaniel Lowe. Because yeah, he's just been consistently good these past 2 years, and he's I think heading into his age 30 season here, so it's not like age is really waning against him. He was not ranked on my list last year, but yeah, he's earned his way on because just because of the consistency, not a guy who's really had a breakout year in his career, like at least in terms of, garnering MVP votes, I think. But over the past 2 years, he is seventh among current first basemen in F WAR. Has also put up a 117 OPS plus and the third most outs above average since the start of 2023. So yeah, it's not like I can't really identify a particular underlying metric that I really enjoy about him, um, or some kind of niche thing. It's just overall whole package player. He's been solid, and I expect that same level of production for this upcoming year, which is why I have him in the top 10. Who do you have at number nine?
Yeah, number nine, I have a guy who was at number seven last year, is dropping off a little bit. And this certainly could be subject to change for obvious reasons, but I am actually putting Pete Alonso in my number nine spot. I was really hoping for a big contract year for him last year, and he did improve in some areas. His batting average went up by 23 points. His OBP went up briefly, or not briefly, but slightly by 11 points. But there was quite a dip in slugging percentage. He hit 12 less home runs in 40 plus more plate appearances, or 37 more plate appearances. Um, so that was a concern for me. I think the biggest problem that I had last year was the rise in ground ball rate and the subtraction in fly ball rate. His ground ball rate went from 36% to 42% last year. His fly ball rate went from 35% to 28%. So, Pete Alonso, it's obviously very clear exactly what his offensive profile is. He's a guy that will hit a lot of home runs, and that's pretty much where most of his value is with his power. There's not too many other strong hit tools. There's also not too many other strong just general tools in general, right? I mean, the defense is easy to overlook as a flaw in first baseman because it's so common, but Pete Alonso is especially problematic over there. At least that's what every metric has said for most of his career. He had -9 outs above average at first last year, which is not great. Um, and on top of that, everything else is right. The contact numbers have never really been there. The base running numbers have never really been there. Uh, but he is very consistent with his power, and I think there's for that reason a good reason to at least keep him on the list. For me, he's at number nine this year, and obviously certainly this could change depending on where he goes in free agency. If he finds himself in maybe a more hitter friendly ballpark, I'd be inclined to maybe move him up the list, or down. Probably not down. I think nine is probably the floor for him for me right now. But yeah, I have Pete Alonso in my number nine spot.
Yes, and yeah, I will match you with that. I have Pete Alonso at number nine as well. Because yeah, this is above replacement radio, baby. If you want to hear about Pete Alonso being a top five first baseman in baseball, you got to go to another podcast. And I would have felt like my Pete Alonso hater status would be sent from gold to at least silver, if you had him below my rankings. So glad we agree that he's number nine. And yeah, I'd say that kind of playfully. I don't really have anything against Pete Alonso personally. It's just people look at his home run total and think that he's as good as the next 40 home run guy, and that's just not the case. So yeah, in terms of why I have him at number nine, over the last 2 years, he ranks eighth among current first basemen in F WAR, and I think that took I think his ranking was lower in 2024 than it was in 2023. And yeah, you mentioned that ground ball rate and fly ball rate. That ground ball rate was a career high. That fly ball rate was a career low. In what has been a 6 year career for Pete Alonso so far. So, that's an alarming sign, and you see it you see it with the results. He had the lowest home run total of his career in non 2020 seasons, and then also the
Which is still
defense.
34.
Yeah, he's still at 34, but that was the lowest home run total of his career. And 34 home run hitter, yeah, that's really good. However, you have to consider with Pete Alonso's like so much, like pretty much all his offense comes from the ability to hit the ball out of the ballpark.
Hmm.
He's not gonna, single and W to death. He does not have that ability, and we've seen like numbers about that. I think among 45 home run seasons, he had the lowest in total bases for 45 home run seasons when he hit 46 in 2022, or no, it might have been 2023.
It was 2023.
2023. So, but yeah, all in all, like yeah, you look at the home runs and it's like, yeah, that's awesome. But in you know, he's a he's a guy. with OPS plus and weighted runs created plus, he's roughly 20 to 25% above league average in offense, and a very big negative on defense and on the base paths. He had -9 outs above average in 2024. And that's also -9 over the last 2 years. So it's not like he had a good defensive year before that either. So yeah, he's all that being said, he's still a top 10 first baseman. He's great. Or he's not. He has the potential to be great. He's still a pretty quality and productive first baseman. Just not as much as I think some people like to think he is. But yeah, I haven't at number 9. Who do you have at number 8?
Number 8 is perhaps where the hot takes start flying in for me. I mentioned, or you mentioned, that I have 9 out of 10 returners on my top 10 list this year, which means that I have one newcomer, and that comes at number 8. It's a guy that we talked about earlier in the episode. It is Carlos Santana. I put him on my list this year because I really do feel optimistic, despite being 39 years old and kind of sneaking onto the list for the first time, that he can put up a top 10 season at first base this year. In fact, he did so last year. Last year, he had, I believe, 4 wins above replacement. It was either 3 or 4. But regardless, it was, I believe, top 5 for the position entirely. So I feel very good about Carlos Santana going into this year. He had 3.0 F4 at first base last year, which ranked 4th among first basemen behind, without spoiling it, the 3 guys that I have in my top 3. So maybe I'm even doing Carlos Santana a disservice by putting him at 8, but obviously the defense is just one part of it. It certainly is a huge part of it. 14 outs above average. In debate with Christian Walker for the best first baseman in the league. On top of that, he's also putting up relatively league average offensive seasons, guided by a lot of walks and also a low strikeout rate. He did strike out only 16% of the time last year. He also isn't chasing a lot, which he never has. And all the expected stuff and all of the batted ball metrics are relatively normal. He does, in fact, pull the ball, like I mentioned, 41% of the time on fly balls, which I really like. I think it'll play very well in Cleveland, perhaps better than it played in Minnesota last year, especially because, there was those talk about those wind tunnels going out to right field in Cleveland last year. So maybe that'll help him when he's hitting left-handed. I don't know. I think Carlos Santana just has oddly enough, very sustainable characteristics despite going into his age 39 season. Obviously, there's always risks that come with age. We saw it with someone like Paul Goldschmidt last year. But I think Carlos Santana can still put up a very strong season next year with the Cleveland Guardians, the team that he is returning to for now the 3rd time.
Right. Yeah, it's yeah, the third stint with the Guardians. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, and by the way, I had Pete Alonso number 7 last year. I forgot to
As
mention.
did as did I. I forgot to
Yeah,
mention that as well. But yes, I
I
had him
think
7.
no, I think
So
you
we
mentioned
we
it.
we're always locked in on Pete Alonso. I
We're
think we had him like one spot apart on the 50s too.
um you had him 48 and I didn't have him on the list, so I guess.
Okay.
And it's up to our imagination where I would have Pete Alonso.
Right.
Um, but yeah, my number 8 is someone who I had at number 5 last year. It is Yandy Diaz, who unfortunately had a big drop in production this past year in 2024. Um, and yeah, it's interesting looking at Yandy Diaz because it's not like one big thing changed and you can identify and be like, oh, that's what happened is, he did that and that's why his OPS plus went down 41 points. It was kind of incrementally just over a period of time. Just everything got a little bit worse. Everything significant got a little bit worse. His ground ball rate and pop up rate went up. His line drive rate and fly ball rate went down. His average exit velocity and barrel rate went down. And as a result of that, his OPS plus went from a great 157 to a, mildly good 116. And that's a 116 OPS plus is a guy who is who is, you know, a big negative on the base paths and not necessarily a positive on defense either. Um, so that definitely drags him down the list a little bit. But yeah, I do have a certain amount of optimism for him still. You know, a 116 OPS plus is still pretty good, as I mentioned. And yeah, he still had an average exit velocity in the 92nd percentile. So that upside is still there. It's not like physically he just faltered and it seems like he's breaking apart. It just seems like there were some flaws in what he was doing last year, and that led to um, that led to an imperfect 2024 season, whereas, 2022 and 2023 were very, very productive years for him. I still think he has the potential to do that, but because of the fact that everything just got a little bit worse last year, I bring him from 5 down to 8. Who do you have at number 7?
Yeah, at number 7, this is where I put ARR alum Tristan Casas, who I put at 8 last year. Um, and I am rising him on the list, not necessarily because of anything he did, or because of just people that went down. 2023 was a year where, or 2024 was a year where not much went right for Tristan Casas. He missed a lot of time with a what was it, a hip injury, a shoulder injury? No, it was like a rib cage injury.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was. Um, yeah, only finished with 243 plate appearances last year, and there was a lot that sort of went wrong to a degree. First of all, his strikeout rate went from 25.1% to 25.1% to 31.7%, a 6.6% increase. I believe that is. Not to mention his line drive rate also went down from 25.6% to 21.5%, a 4% decrease. And his ground ball went from 36% to 43%, a 7% increase. Yeah, he played a lot less. He struck out more. His batted ball metrics were slightly worse. And yet he ended with a 799 OPS. If there's obviously a lot that could have gone better for Tristan Casas, and I can only imagine what those final numbers really could have looked like if we got some of that potential more out of him than maybe we should have. I feel very optimistic still that in a full season we can see a really good year from Tristan Casas. We've already kind of seen that he needs some time to really get going. That's what happened in 2023, and in that season he was a top 5 hitter in Major League Baseball throughout the second half of the season. So I really still do believe in this potential. He's only going into his age 25, I believe it is, season next year. Yeah, age 25 season, still very young. And, we're still waiting for that full year of we saw it in full potential. And I still think that that very much exists within the realm of possibility for Tristan Casas. And I just can't let go of what the potential might be, kind of like Vinnie Pasquantino. I have him at 7. I think he has easy top 5 potential, maybe even top 3 potential in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned, we certainly saw that the second half of 2023. But yeah, I think you had him 8 last year.
I did.
I had him number 10 last year, and yeah, I'm matching you once again. He is my number 7. He's my number 7 first baseman in baseball heading into 2024. Um, or heading into 2025, excuse me. But yeah, like with Tristan Casas, you can look at it as a variety of ways. You can see just last year, like, okay, it's a guy who played 63 games. He had an 800 OPS. He was a negative on defense. It's nothing too crazy, but I kind of choose to look at, because of what he's done and also how young he is, I kind of look at the potential of what he brings. And yes, like, since the start of the second half of 2023, he still has elite numbers in that span. Out of 308 hitters with 400 plus plate appearances in that span, Casas has the 11th highest slugging and 12th highest OPS. And yeah, he didn't have the greatest year, but still he put up a 120 OPS plus through injuries. And yeah, just kept being productive as an offensive player. If he had better defense, he would certainly be up this list, I think, just based on his potential. But yeah, and also I'm just kind of trying to learn from I'm trying to learn lessons from some of my failures from last year. I think in terms of ranking people, I think I ranked a little bit too much on past performance instead of future potential. So with Tristan Cassis, like, he's a 25-year-old with lots of power. He can hit a ball like 470 feet. He has a great eye. Has one of the lower chase rates in baseball. Um, so yeah, I think he's just loaded with potential. So leaving him at like 9 or 10 seems like it could just bite me in the end. So I figure I put him at 7 because yeah, he has more potential than some of those guys who maybe had better seasons last year, but maybe don't have the exact potential for 2025 that Tristan Cassis does. Who do you have in your number 6 hole?
Yeah, number six. This is where I put Yandy Diaz. You put him at 8. I put him at 4 last year, and I kind of made myself the Yandy Diaz guy last year, and paid the price for it in the season. He put up 1.9 F4 and well, like a 116 weighted runs created plus or something like that. It wasn't a great year for Yandy Diaz, but many of the underlying metrics stay the same. Unfortunately, the ground ball rate did increase. It went to up to 55%, down or up from 52%. The fly ball rate went from 20.8% to 17.8%. The line drive rate went down by 2.5% as well. So there's a lot that didn't go right. The pull rate went down even further. It was at 27% last year. It went down to 26.5%. And I believe like 11% of his fly balls were pulled, something crazy like that. So a lot of the batted ball flaws were still there and got even worse. But he's still, first of all, like he's a guy that had a high bat speed and a high squared up rate. Usually those things are mutually exclusive, or are not mutually exclusive. I don't know what the actual saying is. Usually you have one and not the other. You usually don't have both on the good side, but that's still what Yandy Diaz had last year. He had an average bat speed of 73.3 miles an hour, and the average is around 72 miles per hour. And he still had a 93% squared up percentile squared up rate at 31.9%. So he's still hitting the ball in the barrel. He's still doing what he needs to do while keeping that strikeout rate very low. The walk rate did go down a bit last year, which I am a little disappointed by. But I still think there is so much potential here. The biggest thing that I'm looking at, Yandy Diaz has made his living. Oh my goodness. Yandy Diaz has made his living on hitting ground balls up the middle, right? Whether it's line drive ground balls, whether it's balls that just sneak through. He's done that and made his entire career on it in the past. In 2023, 26.8% of his total batted balls were straightaway ground balls. He hit 302 on them, and this with a 299 expected batting average. In 2024, 27.5% of his total batted balls were straightaway ground balls up the middle, and even higher percent. He hit 177 on them with a 255 expected batting average. So the expected batting average did go down by 44 points from last year, but the batting average itself went from 302 to 177. And the exit velocity on these ground balls didn't really go down too much. In fact, I think it stayed the same or maybe even went up. But he was very unlucky on these last year. So I do believe that was a fluke, that it can bring that can bring its way back. And as long as that happens, at least to whatever the mean is supposed to be, Yandy Diaz could bring his way back up to maybe like a 125, maybe even 130 weighted runs created plus hitter, which is still far below where he was in 2023, where he was at like 160. But I moved him down on the list for a reason, obviously. So I still think there's a lot of potential in that bat. Maybe playing in a minor league park will be helpful for him next year. Who knows what kind of impact the George Steinbrenner field effect will have. We'll have to wait and see. But I still think there's a lot of potential with Yandy Diaz, and I'm keeping him in my top 6, putting him at number 6.
Right, right. Yeah, so yeah, my number 6 is your number 10. I have Vinnie Pasquantino at number 6.
Mm.
What I kind of did is I kind of grouped him and Cassis together just because I kind of felt similarly about them in that
Was
they
he on your
were
list last year?
Pasquantino, he was number 9 on my list last
Okay.
year. And the reason why I say I grouped them together is because I had him 9 and I had Cassis 10. Now this year they're 6 and 7. And I kind of grouped them together because they were a little bit underwhelming. They were each a little bit underwhelming last year, maybe for a little bit of different reasons. I know Cassis was a little bit more out of his control, but a little bit of underwhelming seasons, but have that potential, and also have youth on their side. Pascantino's only heading
Mm.
into his age 27 season, so he still has time to really maximize his potential here. And I think because of that potential, I have to bring him up to number 6. And partially, he didn't bring himself up. other players brought themselves down. So it's not necessarily that I think Vinny Pasquantino improved his case, just others maybe dropped theirs down a little bit. But in terms of why I'm more optimistic about Pasquantino than maybe some others are, is he was, despite having somewhat underwhelming numbers, he was 70th percentile or higher in expected batting average, expected slugging, average exit velocity, and hard hit rate. And he was also 90th percentile or higher in squared up rate, whiff rate, and strikeout rate, which all three of those numbers are just kind of showing that you're intelligently doing the right things, just in terms of whether it be technique or just being smart about your hitting. Vinny Pasquantino is doing those things. So I think just doing that and also being 70th, above 70th percentile in average exit velocity, that can garner some really good results for you. So I have to rely on that potential, considering that he is heading into his age 27 season. And yeah, like I said with Cassis, I'm trying to learn from my mistakes from last year and not ignore youth, because there's a lot of potential with a lot more potential with guys in their mid 20s and their mid 30s. So I'm gonna stick with my guns on Pasquantino. He's my number 6 first baseman heading into 2025. Who is your number 5?
Yeah, this is I don't know. This is an interesting one. I had him at number 2 last year, um, which felt the most appropriate, but there was a down year for Matt Olson in 2024. So I put him at number 5. Um, 2023 looks more like the outlier than 2024 was. And I think he's better than what he was last year. I definitely don't think he's going to put up a sub 800 OPS again. Whatever happened last year, I'm not just too sure what that was, but I do feel very confident that he can get his way back up to maybe like a 130 or so. Um, whatever that may look like. But regardless, there's obviously a lot of things that happened last year that were some downgrades. His average exit velocity went down over 2 miles an hour. His strikeout rate went up slightly. His walk rate went down by 4%. His barrel rate went down quite a bit. It went from 16.4% to 12.4% in terms of per batted ball, um, which obviously wasn't great. His fly ball rate also went down from 34.4% to 30.3%, a 4 point drop. But there still was some encouragement. His line drive rate went up by 5%, which was good. His ground ball rate went down by 3%. There's still a lot of potential there. Um, I still think he's going to, like I said, put up a better year than he did last year, but I don't know how close you can really get to 2023. That feels like a season we might never see again from him, which is no fault of his. That just shows how ridiculous that season was. 54 home runs and near 1,000 OPS in 720 plate appearances. That's very hard to replicate. But yeah, I still think there's a lot of potential coming from Matt Olson, and I'm putting him at number 5.
Right, right, right. Yeah, my number 5 is a guy we previously talked about in this episode. He just signed with Houston. I'm talking about Christian Walker, who, like, I feel like is just permanently going to be number 5 or 6 in our lists forever.
Mm-hmm.
He's just he's just fixated in this list. Well, actually, he's gonna be higher on your list, I'm sure. But Christian Walker, he's been, and you've referenced this before. He's been the exact same guy for 3 consecutive years, pretty much, except he was out for a few weeks with an injury this past year. But yeah, the past 3 years, Christian Walker has had an OPS plus between 120 and 125 every single year, and had a Gold Glove all 3 of those years. I'm pretty, or yeah, I think he had a Gold Glove all 3 years. Um,
Yes.
yeah. Uh, just double checking. Yeah. Gold Glover 3 years in a row. OPS plus between 120 and 125 all 3 years in a row. So he's been the same guy. Heading into his age 34 season, shouldn't expect too much of a fall off if there is one. So I'm just gonna bank on the consistency. I don't think in terms of potential, I think there's some guys maybe below him on this list that have more potential than him. But in terms of what I expect this year and what has been happening, I gotta roll with Christian Walker as number 5. Who do you have at number 4?
Yeah, at number 4, this is where I put Christian Walker. I put him at number 6 last year. So he and Yandy Diaz are switching places from where they both were in last year's rankings. I think the move to Houston is going to uplift him quite a bit. Like I mentioned, I like that he's going to be playing at that field more than I liked him at Arizona's. I can't ignore a 3% or 3%, 3 mile per hour increase in average exit velocity between two seasons, going from 88 miles per hour to 91.2 miles per hour. Like that is, if you do that, you're rising in my rankings. I don't care what else you did. Like I can't help but think, okay, if this is, even if this is, even if he goes, if he cuts that in half, if he splits the middle there, it's a 1.5% or 1.5 mile per hour increase between the 2 years, right? Like I can't just ignore something like that because you don't see a 3 mile per hour increase every year. In fact, it was the second highest increase among all qualifiers last year, with Ketel Marte being third on that list. So there was something happening in Arizona where they figured out how to hit the ball harder, which was awesome. Not to mention his hard hit rate went up by nearly 8%. His ground ball rate went down, line drive rate went up, and his pull rate actually went up all the way from 40.6% to 41%. Not a high rise, but I mean, if you can go up from 40, I really like that. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, Houston is going to play to himself better than Arizona did. An estimated 28 home runs in Houston last year, 25 in Arizona. I think, he's going to be playing with a lot of solid defenders in that infield between Jeremy Pena, Altuve, and Isaac Paredes. Yeah, I think Christian Walker has potential to get even better in Houston than he was in Arizona. If all the underlying metrics stay where they are, if the fielding stays where it is, I think he can only go up from there. So I have him in my number 4 spot.
Yep, yep, yep. And yeah, by the way, I had him at number 6 last year. I think you
Hmm.
had him at number 5, or
I have him at number 6.
you had him at number 6 as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, yeah, Christian Walker. Love to give some Walker love. I think MLB Network had him at 9 last year, which was such an abomination.
So yeah, we were more correct on that than they were.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Um, so yeah, my number 4, we flip-flop 4 and 5. I have Matt Olson at number 4. He
Hmm.
was my number 2 first baseman in baseball last year.
Naturally.
And I will say I'm trying to resist the masculine urge to buy into the every other year theory. Um, this man,
That is true.
this man loves odd years. It seems
2021
in
was a
his
nice one.
career. Because yeah, in in every single odd year of his career, his OPS plus has increased over 20 points from the previous year. So literally every single odd year of his career, and he's had I think 8, or I think he's had like 4 of them, or 3 or 4 of them. So I don't know. A 20-point increase in OPS plus is pretty crazy, and considering how low his OPS plus was last year, I certainly could see him doing that again. But yeah, this is more of a vibe pick because I just have a tough time believing that Matt Olson is the guy he was last year. And yeah, I would agree that it would be difficult to expect him to put up a 993 OPS again and 54 home runs. I don't think that's necessarily who Matt Olson is either, but I expect that, average exit velocity and barrel rate to balance out. I expect him to, get over the 30 home run mark once again. And also, what was encouraging is his defense increased, or his defensive performance increased from 2023 to 2024. He went from -5 to +4, outs above average. So, even in, that was all kind of muddled by the fact that he was a was a worse offensive performer, but he did bring more defensive value last year. And then also, I think just things are going to balance out. Matt Olson is certainly better than what he showed last year, and I think he's gonna display that ability in 2025. Who do you have as your number 3?
At number 3, this is where I put Bryce Harper on my list. I had him at 3 last year. I'm keeping him there this year. Bryce Harper has done a lot of amazing things in his career. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at age 16. He was the number 1 draft pick, received more hype than any prospect in a long time. One Rookie of the Year, 2-time MVP. Uh, he's lived up to the hype in every way except for winning a World Series. But maybe the most amazing thing is making everyone forget that he was playing first base, which
Yeah.
I mean that in a good way, to be very clear,
Right,
right?
right.
Like he moved to first base very abruptly, and he's pretty good at it. I mean, he had 8 outs above average last year, and had his best defensive runs above average season in a non 2020 year uh, since 2019 in 2024. Uh, like I'm very amazed with how well he adjusted to the position, while also maintaining the same offensive structure. Right, his OPS was basically identical to what it was in 2023. He did decrease his OBP, but he increased his slugging by roughly the same amount. Um, he also lowered his ground ball rate by nearly 7%, which is awesome because Bryce Harper is not the fastest runner. He's the slowest runner either. He actually has average sprint speed. But when you have his kind of power, you want to be hitting more fly balls. And that's exactly what he did. He went from 22.8% in fly ball rate to 30.4%, which is awesome. He also didn't sacrifice any of his line drive rate. His batted ball metrics were basically perfect, to be honest. Um, he didn't pull the ball a whole lot when he hit it in the air, but he really doesn't need to because Bryce Harper does actually have power to all fields and legitimately can homer to any side of the ballpark. Um, and yeah, I mean, there are a lot of positions where maybe I'd even put him higher than third. There do happen to be two first basemen that I like though, a little bit more than him. But I really do like what I saw out of Bryce Harper, and he's only 32 next year, so there's no reason to believe that we can't see it going forward.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, the top three, I think we have the same top three, not in the same order, but
Yeah.
I think there's some interchangeability there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
my number three is who I was a guy I was very high on last year and put him number one. It's Freddie Freeman. I have at
Mm-hmm.
number three. He experienced, why I drag him down a little bit is, he experienced career lows in all expected numbers and barrel rate, and also had a 6-year low in average exit velocity. And then to top that all off, he's heading into his age 35 season. So it's a time where you would expect those numbers to kind of go down, and maybe they'll um, uh, go down more this upcoming year. However, on the other end, looking at putting a positive spin on his year, he was going through a lot, with his child last year, and I think that obviously can naturally put a damper on things and maybe have your focus away from baseball for obvious reasons and very understandable reasons. And despite that, he still managed a 143 OPS plus. He was still, an elite hitter in baseball despite having to go through that. So that's why he stays in the top three for sure. He also had an elite sweet spot rate as he always does. So the things that are maybe more in his control, he was really really good at. So yeah, I expect another good year out of him, but I'm not necessarily riding the Freddie Freeman wave as much as I was this past year. I think part of that has to do with something maybe I didn't write down. His defense in base running wasn't necessarily as up to par as it was in 2023. Yeah, his outs above average went down, I think, 4, and he didn't steal 20 bases again. He he went from he went from 23 stolen bases to 9 stolen bases. I thought for a second there maybe he would be a pretty good base runner too, but I think his base running kind of came back to earth. So yeah, so like I don't think defense and base running is something to necessarily add to his case anymore. So I'm looking at mostly his hitting, and his hitting numbers went down a little bit, so I think that's why he's down the list a little bit. But still, I think he's a very valuable member of the Dodgers. I'm probably gonna have him like top 20 in my top 50. So yeah, I think he's still a really good reliable player that I'm excited to watch again this year.
Yeah, I put Freddie Freeman at two. I put him one last year, obviously. Yeah, feel like I need to mention that. Yeah, I put Freddie Freeman one last year, two this year. I was very on the fence on how to go with Freeman and Harper. These two are very interchangeable. I don't fault you for putting Harper over Freeman. I assume that's what you did. I guess you could have gone maybe a different route too, though. I did put Freeman over the top because of the upside word, the U word, the P word potential, right? Um, and I am kind of weighing a lot of this on the stuff that he was going through with his son, right? He had to leave the team for a few weeks to be with his 3-year-old son who was going through a lot of medical issues, and there was a lot of stress that I can only imagine, that added to him. He had an 888 OPS before leaving the team and had a 771 OPS after coming back, which, I think he's closer to that 888 OPS, in real time. And, I don't want to I'm not faulting him. I'm not saying, oh, that 771 OPS is something to clearly read into. I would imagine if you have that kind of thing on your mind, baseball goes much further in the back seat than it would otherwise. And I think the results of that showed. I think Freddie Freeman can absolutely get back to that, maybe closer to where he was in say 2022 or 23. I think his OPS can get back beyond 900 again. Defense and base running did obviously dip, like you mentioned, and that was more of a full season thing than it actually was just during those last couple months of the season. I still think the upside is too good to ignore. I still think that he can be exactly who he was, in his 2022 and 23 seasons on pretty much all offensive aspects. So I am putting Freddie Freeman in my two.
Yeah, despite having like, career low numbers in certain metrics, those metrics were still really good. It was because he set such a high standard for himself. And yeah, like I mentioned, 143 OPS plus last year. That's really, really good. So yeah, my number two is Vladimir Guerrero Jr.,
Ooh.
who yeah, he had the best year among all these players last year. He led all first basemen in F4 in 2024. He also had the highest on base percentage, slugging, OPS plus, expected slugging, expected WOBA, average exit velocity, and barrel rate since 2021. So 3-year highs in all those numbers. That's a mix of actual results and expected results, and also the underlying numbers of average exit velocity and barrel rate. And he also had career highs, outdoing 2021 in batting average, expected batting average, and sweet spot rate. So yeah, I mean, it looked like the offense, really came back to life last year. You could argue that it was already kind of coming back to life before that and just wasn't getting the results of it. So it was a wonderful year for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Put up a 930 OPS, and it looks like he's kind of back on track to what we were projecting him to be. However, yeah, he had -9 outs above average, which is not the greatest. He's not super defensively valuable, which might bring him down the list. And yes, I had him number 8 last year. So he's certainly moving up quite a bit from the 8 spot that I had him at last year. But yeah, I think if he had average defense, I might put him number 1. And perhaps I don't have him as high as perhaps I don't have him number 1 because this is not necessarily a repeat success. This truly, like, I mentioned all these numbers were career highs since 2021. This is stuff we had not seen in 3 years. So that's obviously a good sign, but I think in terms of earning that number 1 spot for me, I need to see, that sort of repeat success and consistent success over a longer period of time. For the most part is what I expect for that. But yeah, who is your number 1 first baseman in baseball?
My number 1 is your number 2. I have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. up at the top. I had him at number 10 last year. So he is going from leading off this list to finishing it off for me. I believe in a contract year, career year for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Kind of like what we saw I see a lot of maybe some 2024 Juan Soto in 2025 Vlad Guerrero Jr., right? Coming off of a couple down years, defense being a major concern and a liability, but the upside clearly being there and it just fully showing itself going into the contract year. And I see that from Vlad Guerrero Jr. I think that the Soto payday is going to strike something within him to be like, all right, guess what? One big year, and maybe it's not 765 million, but it's not crazy far off. I mean, he's going to be 27 when he starts his post free agency contract. It's probably going to be, if he has a good enough year, maybe a 12 to 13-year deal, right? Something crazy like that, I would have to imagine. Um, and the underlying metrics, they've always been there for Vlad Guerrero Jr., but they finally just absolutely came through this year. He led the league in expected batting average. He was top 3% in xWOBA, xSlugging, and average exit velocity. The bat speed was 95th percentile, which should be no surprise. But he also maintained a really good strikeout rate, 13.8%. That was in the 93rd percentile. I know that the defense is what it is, and I'm not saying that I expect some sort of crazy defensive resurgence this year. Not even 2024 Juan Soto saw that. But I'll tell you where he can improve, and it's, you guessed it, pulled fly balls. In 2021, 22, and 23, Vlad Guerrero Jr. put up 27% of fly balls being pulled. That is slightly above the league average. In 2024, he was only at 18%. It actually took quite a significant dip. And yet we saw such a huge offensive outbreak from him, a 940 OPS, where he was below 820 in each of the two previous years. I do believe we can get back to that 2021 form where we see, the much better rate of fly balls being pulled with everything else coming through the way it should. And we maybe see a 1,000 plus OPS from Vlad Jr. I do think the contract year will play some sort of factor in maybe a much better 2025 than we saw in 2020, even in 2024. And for that reason, I have him as the number one first baseman going into this year.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, he certainly, in terms of upside, probably the most upside of anyone
Yes, without a doubt.
on this list
And I'm
here.
buying into it.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I mean, like it's not even like you're going fully off of upside. He was the best first baseman in baseball last year. So yeah, my number no, my number one, if you've done your process of elimination, it is Bryce Harper, who was my number three first baseman in baseball last year. And it's not necessarily a full upgrade where he really, you know, the reason why he moved up is because he got better. It's, he was kind of, regular Bryce Harper. He actually, yeah, his OPS was within 2 points of what it was in 2023 this past year. But yeah, I just feel like there's something untapped in there. And even though he's a little bit older than Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I still feel that P word, the potential there. Because yeah, there were some odd trends that he had that I don't think are necessarily gonna stay the same. He had 8-year lows in barrel rate, expected WOBA, and expected slugging. However, despite that 8-year low in barrel rate, he still put up 30 home runs and a 149 OPS plus. He also has been a model of consistency offensively. He is one of only 4 players to put up a 140 OPS plus or higher in 400 plus plate appearances each of the last 4 years. He joins Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, and Juan Soto in that group. And then also on the defensive end, he was third in outs above average among first basemen in 2024. He had eight outs above average, to go with an 898 OPS. Whereas Vladimir Guerrero Jr., he had a -9 outs above average to go along with a 930 OPS. And I still think Bryce Harper can perform better offensively. I mean, his barrel rate was oddly like not near where it was the previous 3 years. And he's not old enough yet to where I think that's going to be a trend. He's only heading into his age 32 season. And I think, he has gold glove potential at first base as a fielder. So it's just more of an overall package with Bryce Harper, plus the potential that he brings, because he is a two-time MVP winner. I'm putting him number one because of that. And I think, ultimately, down to the brass tacks, the defense kind of separates him from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for me. Because I think they're both, very good offensively and also have a lot of potential to do more offensively. But Harper has the defensive advantage, and the 17 out above average difference in defense is enough for me to sacrifice the slight offensive detraction that Harper had, because I think he had 32 points.
30 points less of
Yeah,
OPS.
32 points less of OPS. But I'll take the plus 17 outs above average. Um, But yeah, so yeah, I have Bryce Harper as my number one. Yeah, do you want to review 10 through 1 what our lists are?
Yes, I had Vinnie Pasquantino at 10, Pete Alonso at 9, Carlos Santana at 8, Tristan Casas at 7, Yandy Diaz at 6, Matt Olson at 5, Christian Walker at 4, Bryce Harper at 3, Freddie Freeman at 2, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at 1.
Yeah, I had Nathaniel Lowe opening up at number 10, Pete Alonso at number 9, Yandy Diaz at number 8, Tristan Casas at number 7, Vinny Pasquantino at number 6, Christian Walker at number 5, Matt Olson at number 4, Freddie Freeman at number 3, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at number 2, and Bryce Harper at number 1.
Who
Um,
was your unranked player from last year?
Paul Goldschmidt.
Right, so who'd you replace him with?
Oh, it was Nathaniel Lowe.
He was on your top 10 last year. Okay. Yeah, for me, it was Paul Goldschmidt getting replaced with Carlos Santana.
Yep. Yeah, so so yeah, mostly returners, which I guess as you mentioned before the show, kind of a good sign for us that we didn't completely blow it last year. So that's a
Yeah.
good thing.